Recently, the Nintendo Switch got to show off its muscles with the release of Doom. That game shows you what the Nintendo Switch is capable of. However, we also have to consider other things. Like, if we can see that there's obviously some graphical limitations to the Switch compared to other versions of the same game, especially when it comes to Doom, but this doesn't mean it's a bad thing at all. Graphics aren't the end all of video games at all. Like, we have more to care about than simply how the game looks. Yes, the system's graphical limitations are also limited as far as what it can do, whether it's certain game mechanics, certain AI, it would be impossible if the system can't handle it. However, it's good to note that the Nintendo Switch isn't that unpowerful. The Nintendo Switch is pretty much, I would say, a slightly more powerful Wii U, but not even that. It's pretty much on par for the most part. It is more powerful, but when it comes to the graphical abilities of it's in between. It can almost be similar as well to the original Xbox One, but not there yet. But the point that I'm trying to suggest is that we're in a point in video games that the graphics don't really matter, because most games that are created with the thought that they're going to be released again in the future. So the graphics are, for most video games, are way more advanced when they're created than what any system right now can show. So what happens is that when games are released on any console, the graphics are dumbed down so that they can fit that console. So if you have a PlayStation 4, for instance, you can play like all the games that are on PlayStation 4 right now can essentially play on the PlayStation 3. And this has been shown before with games like Metal Gear Solid 5, which was released both on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360 as well. The thing is, like, when you do this, you have to lower the graphics even further, and it's quite an easy task to do. So some people have been questioning whether or not the new Wolfenstein will look good on the Nintendo Switch, or if the Nintendo Switch could even run this game at all. And the answer is yeah, it can, because all the developer has to do is basically compress all the images, all the graphics in the game until it does get washed out a lot, and it does get blurry, but the game plays fine, and everything within the game itself will play. Like, you will have a playable product in the end, and this isn't a really complicated thing. The PlayStation 3, for instance, has been doing it for years. Most, like, if you look at new emulators for the PlayStation 3, you can tell that you can enhance the graphics to 4K. What it does, those emulators, is that it uncompresses the images, and it allows the textures on many of the things to look less blurry, and that looks fantastic. It looks like a PlayStation 4 game almost. And that's the thing, like, with these systems now, all companies have to do is just, either compress the, the images or the textures that are within the game, and they can basically fit it within a smaller area, and also within using less graphical more graphical limitations. And it's not gonna affect the gameplay itself. It's gonna affect how it looks. And this is how Doom was able to run on the Nintendo Switch. It wasn't really that hard of a, or that technical of a of a fix. That's why we basically got Doom so quick within the year, because it just needed to be brought. It just needed to be compressed here and there, tested, and then shipped. So this is very different, say, between the graphical limitations between the original Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 3. There was a huge graphical leap within that generation, and because of that, it's really hard to put in all these polygons and other things that were present within the games. And then basically you would need to restructure everything, and it would make it just impossible for you to play those things. This is also true between the original PlayStation going to the PlayStation 2. A lot of those games would not run on the PlayStation 3. No matter what you did, you would have to blur up the graphics. You would need to put in lots of fog in order to make it run. It was just graphically very limited. But we're not in that generation anymore. Nowadays, each graphical leap from each system is just so minor that even though you can say the system has doubled in power, the graphical leap itself, just the information that needs to pass isn't going to change much. All that's going to change is the size. This is the same as going to your. You can even go to Windows Paint right now and up the resolution of an image. If you do it too far, your computer won't be able to handle it, no matter how high tech it is. But if you can take that same image and you can compress it and keep compressing it until you have such a small image that you can basically play it, or you can actually see it. And the thing is, like, once you do that on your PC, the image itself isn't going to lose any information that much. I mean, it'll probably look blurry here and there, or it may look a little bit jaggy in some areas, but pretty much you have the same image. You can see it and you can enjoy it. However, this wasn't true if you go to a computer much more in the past, because you don't have the, for instance, the color set up for the same system. So you're gonna have to see an image that's kind of in black and white, and you might not even be able to see the image. On top of that, you have to compress it so much, or you have to make it so small that you can't make out anything. And that was the thing with the original PlayStation, going to the PlayStation 2, and even going to the PlayStation 3. But going from the PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4, and even the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X, the graphical jump isn't that drastic. Where we're talking, we need to up we need to make it so that we can't even see it, kind of thing. We're not at that point anymore. All we need to do is get rid of some textures, compress them, and just put them in play. And this is why many games like Doom will play just fine on Nintendo Switch. The new Wolfenstein, I also am going to assume it will play just exactly the same. It'll play fine. Yeah, it'll look uglier in some ways, but that's a given. Like, that's you have a handheld system that can play those AAA games that would run on something else, and they don't look dumbed down like, say, when you had an original Game Boy. Like, when you played Mortal Kombat on an original Game Boy, they had to make a new game because they couldn't just take the old game and transfer it into that card. It just didn't fit. And even if they could make it fit, it would not run that good. So, like, it's a different time and different, completely different architecture and different means of working. We're in a position where we haven't each generation we don't jump anymore as much as we used to. I do believe we're gonna have another drastic jump in the near future, because we're just moving to different ways to make computation, including more cores and other things, and even more cores and graphics cards. Once we get to that situation, yeah, there's gonna be a massive graphical leap, and once that happens, then yeah, I would say these games cannot be played because they're gonna be technical things like AI is gonna be different. Um, Textures are going to be different. The way the world interacts with you in the game is going to be different. And also, we're going to see more realistic looking graphics. Things that if you try to dumb down in textures, is just going to ruin the whole experience, and it's also going to ruin how the game runs. It's not going to run, in other words. So we're going to get there soon, I think, again. But at the current moment, each generation leap has been rather small, to the point where the Nintendo Switch is just fine. It'll play your games. You're not going to see any problems. So anyone who's thinking that Wolfenstein or whatever game comes out on any other system can't be run on the PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, they're incorrect, because it will play fine. You just need to lower the graphics, and unfortunately, that's the case with most games. I mean, it's again the same thing with, like I said, Metal Gear Solid 5 and a bunch of other like Assassin's Creed games that were released on the PlayStation 4 and also the PlayStation 3 when the system first came out. Since the PlayStation 3 had a larger install base, and also the Xbox 360, it made sense to release on all four systems that were out at the time. So for the Nintendo Wii U, but that's another point. But it's doable. The thing is that the graphics won't look that drastically different, where you're like, oh my god, the graphics look like shit, kind of thing. They'll look fine. They won't necessarily look as great, but they'll play just as good, and you'll definitely be able to enjoy the game. The only thing is, like, if you do own another system, you may want to buy the game on another system, as long as you don't want to, have the advantage of taking it with you. That's the main selling point of the Nintendo Switch. It's a system that you can take with you. Yes, the graphics are worse, but that's to be expected. You saw how small that thing is? It's amazing what they did. Like, I wouldn't, for a handheld, this is up to par. And this is the main point that makes the Nintendo Switch just a great system. This is Nintendo again trying to play catch up with their graphics. This isn't Nintendo doing something that actually makes sense why the graphics aren't that great. It's because the system is such a small system that is good for you to travel. I wouldn't expect that to look as good as PlayStation 4, even though it's been 5 years since it's been released. I totally understand why it looks the way it does. Like I wouldn't expect more, and for the price, I wouldn't have expected necessarily more either. It looks really good. It's a really good system. It's my favorite Nintendo console since the GameCube. It still hasn't beaten again, like I said, the SNES for me, simply because that's the whole nostalgia thing. And by the time that actually does happen, I would have to like Nintendo. I would need to know that Nintendo's going to support the system long run. One of the main flaws of Nintendo has been that Nintendo can at some point just decide not to keep caring about the system, and they've done this first from my experience with the Nintendo 64. After 98 came by, like Nintendo 64 had this drought of games coming each year, and yeah, there were some good games here and there, but it wasn't. After Legend of Zelda dropped, there really wasn't anything that was that drastic. This is why I ended up buying a PlayStation. I remember, and I had a blast. Otherwise, if I just had my N64, I would have hated like my video game life during that whole time. The same thing happened again with, I would say, the Wii U, and the reason why the GameCube for me is one of my favorite consoles is because Nintendo really tried. Yeah, there was droughts at the end of this system, but I never felt it be as bad as I did with the N64 before it, and it was just Nintendo really wanted that system to succeed. But the Wii U was again the same story, but it was from the very beginning, and that was what sucked about the Wii U. The Wii U from the very beginning was like the N64 within the last 2 years of its life, and it was it was it was bad. I think, and so you don't know if that's gonna happen with the Nintendo Switch. Like, yeah, the N64 sold very well at first. I thought it was gonna be all other systems on the market, especially in America. Like, it just felt that way for every kid and for everyone out there. They assumed that system was gonna beat the PlayStation, and in the end, it didn't. It was such a surprise. I remember, but it is what it is, and Nintendo just didn't support it after a while, and that was kind of like a shock to me. I remember at that time, but I thought there was a reason because it was cards, so I forgave them for that. But they did it again with the Nintendo Wii U, and that was really strange for me because they did it from the very beginning. The Wii U was really kind of like a shitty system because of that, and that's why I've been burnt. I felt burned by Nintendo. So the graphics aside, I don't think that plays so much the issue in this. It's just whether or not Nintendo's going to be willing to work with it. So when it comes to graphics on the system, Nintendo Switch for the most part is pure gold. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, and as long as Nintendo keeps this momentum, it is by far going to be the best Nintendo system since I think the SNES, and that's saying a lot because the Super Nintendo was so great. Like, I'm pretty sure people will love this if they just keep this momentum up. I'm sure they will, but at the same time, being Nintendo, they the way they handle the Wii U just makes them kind of untrustable for me with this going on. So these are basically the pros and cons of what the Nintendo Switch has like at the moment. I'm hoping for success. I'm hoping for the best thing coming next year. But again, like I said, the N64, when it first started out, it was the greatest system ever, and it lasted so long. Like, it had just great games coming out year after year up until '98, and then after that, droughts, like really bad droughts, I would say. And then after that, like the GameCube was great, and then the Nintendo Wii came out. I didn't really care too much for the Wii. I mean, like other people, because it just didn't feel like a Nintendo console to me. Like, it always felt like it was so marketed more. Like, since it was marketed more to the casual gamers, it felt a lot like what you would see if you were playing some like your smartphone games right now. There was such a variety of games. A lot of them were kind of not that great. And yeah, it's an underrated system because there's a lot of great games on it. But at the same time, I never been able to, like, it's the same thing as saying like your smartphone right now, whether it's the Play Store or the App Store. Um, is one of the best systems, underrated systems there is out there because it has some tons of great games, and yeah, it does. But a lot of them are. It's really foreshadowed by a lot of really bad games, really bad games, and that's the same way I feel with the Nintendo Wii U. Going with the Nintendo Wii, Nintendo Wii U. I bought it because I thought, wow, they finally got a remote back, so maybe we'll get the same classic old fun games that I used to like about the GameCube. Where we maybe at least we'll have some GameCube action going on. And no, Nintendo basically dropped that system from launch, and After that, it was kind of sad. But the Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Switch is a breath of fresh air when it comes to Nintendo. Like it is the best console they've released since the GameCube, in my opinion, and it's been a blast so far. And I just hope they don't get that same thing where they just drop this console just halfway through its life again. Like I don't want to see that. If they do that again, I have to say like I'm completely done with Nintendo. Because like I know I keep saying this year after year, but it's gonna be sad if they do that. But I don't see that happening. The Nintendo Switch is just such a phenomenon that it's gonna probably stay around for life, and then it's gonna be probably if it keeps this up, and then next year we see a new uh, better games at E3, and no businessmen. I don't want to see Reggie again in a puppet form. I don't want to see Shigeru Miyamoto in a puppet form. I don't want to see anybody like be mascots for the company. Nintendo would be just doing fine, just fine, and that would be the best thing ever. And I really want to see like when the GameCube came out, we saw all these weird games like a new Zelda right away announced and a new Mario, and I want to see that happen again. I want to see a new Mario, a new Zelda. I'm not saying like completely different. I just want to see a new thing like that, and maybe a new IP would be great. Because one of the things I want to make a video about is Breath of the Wild. I do love that game. However, my main critique for it is like I feel it would have been much better if it was a different IP because I don't see anything Zelda about it. And I don't mean like I don't see the same puzzles or anything like, but I don't agree with necessarily what I don't. But I actually don't agree with necessarily with people like Aaron Hansen who have this Ocarina of Time as being a bad game because I do get their points because the game was very predictable, but the game became predictable and the puzzles were like kind of lame and leading you into certain places. Only after you've actually played the game and finished it, you realize this. When you were first playing the game, it was complete misery. This was completely new, so it wasn't such a formula as it became later on. So I feel Ocarina of Time was by far a masterpiece of a game. But later on in the Zelda series, when we saw Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, yeah, this became kind of predictable and kind of lame in that sense. Although I do love Wind Waker, I don't like Twilight Princess as much because it was basically predictable, and then it also had they added something to the game, but it wasn't enough. And I didn't like the fact that the Wii version was mirrored, especially nowadays since the Wii U version isn't, and it just I can see that they intended not to have it that way. It ruins the game in a lot of ways. The motion controls for that game kind of ruined it, and Skyward Sword did the same thing. I like Skyward Sword better because it was made the way it was supposed to be made, and it played like there were certain things in the games that played better. But again, it was again a predictable game. There was nothing surprising there. So I'm hoping that for the Nintendo Switch we see something different. But for a new IP at least, or if they do another Breath of the Wild kind of thing, I would like to see for Breath of the Wild. I would like to see um I would like to see basically a new like Zelda game, like in the Breath of the Wild style, but more Zelda themed things in the level. This is what I'm mostly referring that is lacking in Breath of the Wild was this more Zelda theme. I know there was dungeons before, but they don't necessarily need to have dungeons. Just something more. I like the open world thing, but even if there was something that, whether it be more like the lore of the original Zelda games or something like that, or something we saw more in Ocarina of Time, where there was towns and stuff, that were better constructed than the ones we saw here. I would have preferred it because there was a lot of climbing, there was a lot of other things, and it was great in Breath of the Wild. But I felt for some reason something didn't feel very Zelda-y for me, and it's mostly the presentation in the theme. And I don't think this necessarily had to be a Zelda game. Is my point. I feel like they did that more for the sales and for the reviews than they did it for anything else because it felt like yeah they did capture what people were trying to say, but like the original Zelda had a Zelda feeling, like the Zelda bad guys were there, and then everything else, and it was kind of open world, and I think that's what people were wanting when they said they wanted an open world Zelda in 3D. But instead they got Breath of the Wild, which is something they weren't expecting necessarily, but it is open world and it is 3D, but it's slightly different. It's still a phenomenal game. It's one of my favorite games, but of all time, but it's not. I feel like it could have been better if it wasn't necessarily a Zelda game. I feel for me personally, This is just my opinion. I feel like it kind of loses points simply because it is a Zelda game. And it doesn't really capture that Zelda mood that I've always associated with Zelda, if that makes sense. Anyways, but that's not really that important. My that I would just like to see a new game for the Nintendo Switch that captures what I'm trying to say is like they can make a new IP, and Nintendo is surely can make a new IP that would be just great. It would have been awesome to see it. Um, and unfortunately we didn't get that yet. And I think it's time. I think it's time we see more from Nintendo than just Zelda and Mario over and over again. Like we did see Arms, and Arms was a good new game, but it's I feel like that's not enough. Like we have already two of them, but I would like to see some adventure game, something like Mario or something that's thought out. That's a new IP, something that's more than just some action game that you play or some puzzle game that you play real fast or something. I would like to see a new IP with something with more meat on it. In other words, but we'll see. We'll see. The Nintendo Switch is probably going to be the home to that, and if it is, it'll be like an SNES killer for me. Like overall, because like what made the SNES so great was that there was so many new IPs just thrown there. We saw F-Zero. We saw a bunch of other things as well. Like Earthbound was there. There was just so many good games. It's hard to remember them all at this point. Like it just was nice to see. Super Mario RPG was there. There was tons of things like that were just new. They were creative and they tried. Yeah, a lot of them didn't survive that generation, but still, it was there and it was nice to see. I'm hoping the same for the Nintendo Switch. And the Nintendo Switch is probably going to meet it, to be honest, and it's just gonna be great. So let's just pretty much end this video there. Like we'll see what happens, but the graphical limitations again, just to end it on what I started this conversation on. The graphical limitations of the system aren't that important in this generation, I don't think, because again, like I said, like any game can fit on any console no matter what. It doesn't take that much work either. That's the other thing that people are worried about. Like it's going to be too much work. They're already doing this work for PlayStation 4 as it is. Most games are already dumbed down. It's only a minor switch in settings on your computer to dumb it down even further so it can fit on the Switch. It's not a big deal. The big deal is whether or not companies want to work with Nintendo, and that's another video, and I'm probably gonna release that video tomorrow. But basically, companies do not want to work with Nintendo since the original Nintendo system, the NES came out, because of the way they said it was to do business with Nintendo. They basically had draconian rules, and no company wants to work with Nintendo because they to this day I feel like they still do those kinds of things, and they're willing to do it. Nintendo seems, at least with the Switch, trying not to do such things, but still, like I think many developers haven't forgotten and haven't returned. Again, another point for another video. That's it for this video. I hope you have a good day, guys. I'm signing out. Sorry this was so long, but it's just my catch up of the recent 9 months life of the Nintendo Switch and how well the Nintendo Switch is doing. Goodbye, guys. Bye.